Welcome to Kidney Quest Episode 4. Please welcome Cari Maxwell.
All right. Welcome, Miss Cari, to Kidney Quest Episode 4. You know me from the summit that we met in DC. This is Darth Sara. We're so happy to have you here.
I'm so happy to be here. It's great to see you again, even if it's not in person.
Definitely, yes. If you can tell us a little bit about yourself and then your relationship to the kidney.
Sure. So I am a wife to Charlie. I'm a mom to three girls, Becca, Maddie, and Sid. We are impacted generationally by polycystic kidney disease. So my father had that, and as do my two siblings. And he got it from his mother, who I was never able to meet because she passed away. So it's a family thing in our family, PKD. And it's something that other people with PKD will really relate to, the family nature, the generational nature of it. But that is what has made me passionate about getting the word out, because I have been fortunate to know my diagnosis very early because it was hereditary. And so I've known about my kidney disease since I was 18. And, that was a little over 2 decades ago. So I've had plenty of time to prepare and become part of the National Kidney Foundation, as well as the Polycystic Kidney Disease Foundation, and champion patients' rights, some governmental issues that impact the needs of all kidney patients across the country, as well as other fundraising efforts. Because of having this advanced diagnosis and the ability to have so many healthy years ahead of me versus, like, as you and I know, so many people who what's called crash start into dialysis when they don't know, just like our friend Pesh. So I've been passionate about that. I also have a daughter who's already diagnosed, one of my three. So it's important to me on that level too, to make sure there's more happening for the next generation, not just my kids, but everyone's kids. And so it's a big part of my life, but I do work full time. I actually work in employee health benefits in medical cost containment strategies. And so I'm very into that side of things, and that kind of ties into what I do on the kidney side. And that pretty much takes up most of my time between working, being a mom, and my volunteer work.
Awesome. Thank you. I was just reading interesting statistics on the National Kidney Foundation's website today. I try to re-educate myself when I can to know what I can share, and read that I think it was 37 million adults in the US have a chronic kidney disease. And then among those, like 90% of the adults actually don't even know that they have a kidney disease. And it is significant that you don't really think about. And honestly, I'm a living kidney donor, as you know, and I became one last year. So I'm still a newbie in this realm of things. And I'm going to be very honest with you. I thought that things like kidney disease, I haven't really thought of myself.
And that's one of the, when we were on Capitol Hill together, that's one of the issues that we addressed, is that there are 37 million Americans at risk for chronic kidney disease, and 90% have no idea. And I'm fortunate to feel like in the 10%, even though I have a disease I didn't ask for, and I couldn't make any other healthy choices. I couldn't do anything to avoid having this disease. So I didn't ask for it. But at the same time, I think, okay, I'm not part of that 90%. And so I feel a responsibility as part of that 10% to really, like, okay, what can I do to help these other 90%? Get a little bit of awareness, maybe just a little bit early, because I can't imagine walking into the hospital thinking, I don't know what's wrong with me, and finding out I have end-stage kidney disease. And that happens to many, many kidney patients, like you said, because they are unaware of their diagnosis. And so that I think I look pretty healthy from the outside. You wouldn't know that my kidneys only function at about 25%. And so that's something that the outsider wouldn't know. Whereas other chronic illnesses, there are physical signs that you can look at someone and kind of guess that there's something going on with them. Whereas kidney disease can be kind of hidden for a long time. And so, what you're doing is very important to just get the extra information out there for people.
Yeah. And it got me thinking, why aren't we seeing more of the kidney disease awareness? For example, organizations like NKF, they're doing an amazing job trying to advocate the stories and all that. but yet we still don't really see it everywhere, like the other awareness campaigns and whatnot. What do you think is a big difference between the the amount of, I should say, like for the lack of better words, infiltration in, it can be social media, it can be the news, it can be in our daily lives.
I think there's a couple things. What comes to mind is the things that I've learned about the kidneys and what they do in the body. I think are just really things that we don't think about. That it's very underrated. They're little powerhouses in our bodies. They're responsible for regulating our blood pressure, which is vital. I mean, having out of control pressure can damage your organs, your blood vessels, and it can kill you. They help regulate different vitamins and hormone levels in the body that are responsible for all kinds of, metabolic processes. And so those are really underrated things. I think in general, when we think about things that we would go see a doctor about, they have more to do with broken bones and
Right.
major organs
Something
that,
happening now.
yeah, exactly. Like it's
Yeah.
imminent. We have to go, take care of this thing. I think that's one thing. So that's just a general education that needs to happen better. I think because it can be so invisible to people, you can look at the group, for instance, of people that came to the Hill back in March for the NKF summit. And you can look at that group and you can't really tell, for the most part, who
Right.
is a living donor, who's a family
Mhm.
member, and who's a patient across the spectrum of those people
Mhm.
versus another group that may impact just kids or something. You can look at that group and understand, okay, I see who they're fighting for here today. And I think that ties into the other reason. I was talking to a former NKF staffer who's now gone on to work in a different area of health and human services. And I said, why is it that your organization gets more bills through, why is it so hard for the NKF? And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is some of the bills that we were actually talking about back in March have to go through several committees, and it's
Right.
difficult. But
Yeah.
also, again, back to that kind of invisible nature of things, when you're lobbying Congress about pregnant moms and babies, everybody can connect to that. Everybody
Right.
understands the emotional impact of just pregnancy, childbirth, child rearing.
Right.
Like, I think even if you haven't had a child, you understand that.
Mhm.
I think it's harder to really get people emotionally invested in kidney disease if they have no connection to it. And that is why we
Right.
lead off a lot of those congressional conversations with the first question: what's your connection to kidney disease? Just to see
Mm.
where they're at.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. So for the viewers, I actually joined the National Kidney Summit for the first time this year, and it was such a wonderful learning opportunity for me to actually see what is going on behind the scenes, and it's not just about sending letters and all that. It's just so much that goes on of like the stories of all these people that are coming in and they're traveling from everywhere.
Mm,
What hit me the most was, again, I'm a living kidney donor and I can just travel as I can, which is, again,
right.
I'm making it as a great campaign of like, hey, I donate a kidney, but I'm totally fine. But at the same time, for the people who are waiting to receive or just received or, in that realm of things, they still need the dialysis. They still are like that living that moment of we need this soon.
Mhm.
And it just hit me so much. And I personally feel like there are still a lot of challenges that we have to overcome, as kind of like a kidney family together. What are some of the challenges that do you think that we are currently facing?
Yeah, I think that the unknown aspect of it too, we have been, I'll say fortunate. I don't mean this in a fortunate for those people, but there have been more celebrities that have encountered kidney disease, and that has shed a little bit more light, on kidney disease. Selena Gomez, Wilmer Valderrama, some of those, they have a bigger following, maybe on social media, or their names are more well known. They definitely help increase the visibility of our cause, and you're doing that too. So just anything that you can do to increase the amount of positive information that's out there that points people to actionable things they can do themselves. The NKF is great at putting out any kind of letter that all you have to do is really sign your name, and send it. And the interesting thing is sometimes we feel like, oh, I won't take 5 minutes to do that because it won't make a difference. But I recently filled one out and I got a response back from my congressman's office, and it was tailored to the information about that I emailed about. So it was about the
Wow.
Honor Living Donors Act,
Okay.
and it went into detail about where that's at and other living donation legislation that he has already signed on to that was separate from that. So it was prepared. Maybe it was still a bulk email sent
Mm.
to everyone that sent that letter, but it wasn't just a thanks for contacting us, we got it. It
Right.
was an
Which is kind of
actual
usually what we do get.
right, right. And so
Yeah.
I think people need to understand, and I think that's the power of, and that's why the Hill Day is so impactful and exciting, because there's a lot of collective energy and momentum that
Right.
happens when 160 people all go do the same thing on the same day.
Yeah.
And then the kind of the momentum of all of the staffers, and maybe they go out after work and talk about their day and say, "Oh, hey, I had this person come in and tell me their story."
Mm.
And it was so like meaningful to hear a personal story. I know hear your story and mine and the others in our group, there were people that were really impacted by what we shared with them.
Yeah.
And so I think that the ball gets rolling that way when those things happen. And I think until I set foot on Capitol Hill and did that, I didn't have a lot of faith in that system, that
Mm.
that
Yeah.
one person could really make any kind of change. And one person
Right.
really doesn't, but it's one person times one times one times one, everyone doing something. That's what gets that ball rolling.
No, definitely. I agree. It was definitely a special moment just coming together, talking about the things that we're trying to change. And I've never been in that position where I could be a part, even if it's a small part, I was a part of something that could potentially lead to a change. So, a quick question, just going back to your condition, you said it was hereditary,
Mhm.
and your case is a little different from other interviewees I had, that you actually knew really early on that you're going to have to prepare for this.
Yeah.
Now, this might sound like a really dumb question, but does it actually really help knowing ahead of the time about your conditions? And what are some of the things that one should know about? For example, like what are the risk factors? What should you be worried about? So that when you go to the doctors, even in your 20s or even in your teens, some things that you can ask about.
Yeah, I think having the advanced knowledge, it wouldn't have really benefited my grandmother. She passed away when she was about my age. My dad, who had his kidney transplant in his early 40s, so around my age as well. But it has benefited me because of the information that's out there now. So we have information about the ketogenic diet.
Mm.
There's medication. I was even in the clinical trial for the first ever and still only medication to help slow the progression of
Wow.
ADPKD, which is what I have. So none of that existed 2 generations ago or even 1 generation ago. And so we're in a great time right now where now that there's one medicine out, that
Right.
means it's not long before there's going to be competition.
Mm.
And that's great. That's great that we live in a society where these other pharmacies and pharmaceutical companies now want to compete to get their medicine out there. And so that's great for patients.
Yeah.
But also, I think back to the Capitol Hill Day that we were just a part of in March, one of the legislative items that we were asking about has to do with getting kidney screening. So like a standard lab or something, like that,
Like a
that would exactly,
yeah.
that would get that covered as part of your annual wellness visit. So
Mm.
if we can get more people screened early, because there's a simple lab test that people can have done. Also, just regularly getting your blood pressure checked. You don't have to
Yeah.
wait for that annual wellness visit. If you don't have a home blood pressure cuff, there's usually some in pharmacies and
You
places like Target and Walmart usually have them.
have a little station.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, because that's an early sign of that something is wrong too. It doesn't always mean kidney disease, but it can mean other things. So if you
Right.
have greater than 130 over 90 consistently blood
Mm.
pressure, that's definitely something to talk to a doctor about.
Yeah, no, definitely. And this is a type of the information that I feel like, again, we need this early on, right? It shouldn't be a surprise. It shouldn't be this. I just posted a video yesterday because I went to my own checkup and, I went to the gynecologist and just realizing how many people just don't want to talk about going to checkups, still to this day, it's 2024.
Right.
And a lot of the people are looking on TikTok or Instagram about healthy food, healthy living, but then yet no one really talks about checkups.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something you should be ashamed of. It's something you should be proud of that you're doing. And because you don't really know what's happening in your body, like you said, especially things like kidney disease, what I'm learning is that you don't really feel anything until a certain point.
Right.
And that's really scary. It's, I think Pesh told me it's a silent disease, which means that you really don't know until it hits. And when it hits, it can be too late, which I don't want to say it, but for a lot of the people, it is.
And I think it's one of those things that it's not like weight gain, where you can kick the can down the road in a lot of cases, and you just know you'll get to a point where you decide, okay, I'm going to change this, and you can take off the weight, right? Some people can make those choices. With kidney disease, when the damage is done, it's done. It's not reversible, and there is no cure. So the gold standard is getting a transplant. But as you pointed out, there are 90,000 people waiting for one.
Right.
And so the number of those people that will get a living donor is so small because we still don't have that system perfected. And there are a lot of constraints, as you know, and there are some financial implications and things like that. So it's one thing I think people need to think about in terms of, like you said, the annual women's health exam, the annual men's health exam. There are reasons that those things exist. And I think the kidney screening will be a regular part one day. On Pesh's podcast, I was listening to that today. They talked about the kidney tsunami of patients kind of resurging from the pandemic into dialysis. And so that's a huge need in our country. And we know that we don't have all the staff to handle all of that. And again, that's like a whole other, that's a whole other episode, but that advanced knowledge does help a lot of people do things to kind of just tap the brakes. And I think that's what we want to be thinking about is how can we tap the brakes? We know we can't reverse it. But if we catch it early, we can slow things down. And I'd rather be doing that than be caught in the position where I have no options but dialysis.
Right. So for people who are just maybe wondering, watching this video, or in general, what would the first step for them be? You might already have the disease diagnosed, or maybe you don't know anything about it. Where is the first place that these people should go, to start the process?
I'd say minuteforyourkidneys.org. That is a webpage that the National Kidney Foundation put out that just asks about some common risk factors. And if that gives any sort of inclination that you do have risk factors for kidney disease, you can then go from there and call your primary care physician if you have one. If you don't, there are lots of them available. A lot of people have telemed as part of their health medicine offerings. A lot of times those are free or very minimal cost, and it's just a video chat just like this. And that provider can then send you to get some testing done. It's a very simple test. At this point, I feel like a little bit of a pincushion, so I know it can be a little scary, but it's always okay to tell someone that's going to draw your blood that it's your first time or you don't do well with it. Ask them to use a small needle. Ask if you can lay down. There's lots of different things to kind of just ease yourself into that process, because nobody loves it, but it is a natural thing that we have to do to make sure that we can get our blood tested and find out what's really going on in there. Because blood pressure is just one thing. They can take that without being too invasive, but there's other things they can do to find out how well our kidneys are functioning.
Awesome. Thank you. I did post a link right below.
I see that. It works. Yeah, it's great.
So kind of a final question. As an advocate yourself right now, what is your goal? What is your next step? What is the one thing that you would like to accomplish for yourself and for the advocacy?
I definitely feel living donor transplant is something that is my priority. I want to preempt dialysis and have a preemptive transplant. So that means having a living donor lined up before my kidneys get to the point where they cannot clean my blood properly enough anymore, and I have to go on dialysis, which is basically like life support for your kidneys and for your body. So it's important to me to see things happening in our legislative efforts that help just ease barriers and just kind of remove them, really. But I'm realistic that, barriers are always going to be there. But I think, and you can probably attest to this, if it was super easy, everyone would do it. And that's true universally, but it is hard. And I think that's where it means that someone is really invested in the
Right.
choice they're making when they know it's going to cost me personally. It's going to cost me time off work. It's going to cost me some recovery time. We know through what we've learned that, medical costs are all covered by the recipient's insurance and
Right.
everything. And there are some legislations out there that help people under a certain income with their out of pocket costs for travel and other things. But it's not enough and it needs to be better. There needs to be no income cap when it comes to any expenses that someone might have to incur to travel to a hospital to have their kidney taken for donation. They probably have to have a caregiver come with them and their time off work, their travel, their meals, lodging, all those things. It's my plan to kind of raise some of that money because I don't want whoever that is to suffer financially for me on my behalf. And that's just where I'm coming from personally. I know everybody
Yeah.
kind of approaches it differently, but not everybody has that opportunity, right, to do
Yeah.
that. And
Yeah.
so that's why I feel like it's got to come from these legislative efforts. So the Honor Our Living Donors Act and the Living Donor Protection Act, I think, are the top priorities. That would be a huge win for me to see those come to fruition in the next year or so. Living Donor Protection Act has been churning through for
Yeah.
several years. Like I said, it has to go through several committees, and that's why it does take so long for it to kind of work its way around. So that would be a win for me to see that happen and just to keep getting opportunities as my health allows me to keep traveling and telling my story. I've been all over this country telling my story to doctors, nurses, researchers, other patients. And that opportunity just really helped remind me that the pain and whatever I go through is not for nothing, that it's for a purpose. And hopefully it helps somebody else. And so that would be just kind of part of that as well, to keep being able to do what I'm doing.
Awesome. No, thank you so much. You have been an inspiration since the day I met you. So I just love your vitality. I love your the actions, the can-do attitude. And it's just, it's been such a pleasure meeting you in DC. And obviously I can't wait to hang out with you again.
I will just say, to anyone listening, like you're an inspiration as well. And everything that you've done and what you've put out there has, I believe, reached a segment of people that may never have heard about living donation, kidney disease, all the experiences that you and your recipient have gone through. And telling that story was so powerful. I'm getting chills right now just thinking about the way I felt when I heard you and Greg tell your story on Capitol Hill and how just amazing and just purposeful that had to have felt for you. So I hope that that was the case, that you got to get a kind of sense of like, okay, this is what we're doing here.
Yeah, no, it's a little bit personal, but like I actually grew up not having a close family, and it was such a eye-opening experience for me because ever since I donated a kidney, I actually made more friends. I feel like I have a much bigger family that I know of, and it's there is a benefit and merit to doing something like this. It's not just about I don't really like when people say you're a hero. I'm like, no, I just did it because I was really curious and I wanted to help. But at the same time, it's like I want to be very thankful because that really changed my life in such a great way that I'm not alone and I can keep this, this thing moving.
Yeah. Yeah, and think about how it makes Greg feel and his wife and family, that they get some more years with him. So, I mean, I know hero is a term I'm sure is hard to kind of wear, but not everybody steps up like that. And so that's definitely very honorable. And I hope there's many more people that will follow in your footsteps.
Definitely. I hope so. So, well, thank you so much for your time. This has been such a pleasure. And thank you for just bearing with me with this whole attempt of interviewing.
Yeah, it's been great. It's been great catching up with you. It's not been long, but it feels like it's been long,
It
and
has been, right? Yeah.
hopefully
Yeah.
it won't be till next summit till we get to do it again.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful evening.